Hello and welcome to CAN TV Conversations. I'm Redrika Taylor, and today we're talking about repairing Africans, Caribbeans, and African American relations. Today joining me is Sena, aka Alinco, born and raised in Ghana. He is an award-winning radio personality on the Progressive Mind Show. The Progressive Mind Show is an online radio show in Chicago that runs on Wednesdays evenings from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Facebook Live and YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rodrika. I am pleased to be here with you and to speak to your audience as well.
Awesome. Now, there can sometimes be tension in identity when talking about Black Americans and those who identify descended from slavery and Black Africans from African American and the Caribbean. Do you think there's a disconnect when African immigrants and African American culture are involved? And if so, why do you think that is?
Yes, I thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, your platform, your organization, and your audience. So yes, I do see a disconnect, and because it's every day. I mean, you bump into Black people from different walks of life, or Black people in the diaspora, and their attitude towards, their animosity towards each other. It's like we don't care, even for the fact that we look the same. We don't care for each other. And it's evident everywhere. And so there is that disconnect. And I think it's because of our history. You know, our foundation is from the continent of Africa, but we are scattered everywhere through some of the events that you mentioned, slavery, migration, and all of that. And as a result, we have lost touch of who we are and our connection. And so this is why I think there is that disconnection, and we have not necessarily been educated well based on our history. We have not been taught who we actually are, and so there has to be a disconnection, because the people who don't know their connection, or who don't know their history, or who don't understand their history and their connection, there's bound to be that disconnect. And so this is why I think there is.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, you talked about education. What are your thoughts about how American early education represents the history of Africa? And how do you think, if at all, that affects the identity development of both Black Africans, Americans, and African immigrants?
Great question. So I wasn't born here, and I spent most of my adult life growing up in Ghana. I was born and raised in Ghana. I only came here, I'll say 13 years ago. And so I came for a graduate program here, and being in corporate for some time. And so I cannot necessarily, having spent just maybe a year and a half in grad school, I can't necessarily speak to the educational curriculum of America as it pertains to African history. But what I've read and I've heard, what I've heard and read is that it is not in depth what has been taught when it comes to African history to Africans or the people here. The history, it's like they scratch the surface of the rich African history, the vast African history. It's like it's being scratched on the surface, and even so, it is not from my opinion, not original, and not necessarily, it's not 100% accurate. A lot of times, the stories that are being shared are most of the negatives, a few of the negative things that have happened to Africans and our continent, and is being perpetuated. Like, China, America, Europe, all the continents have their issues. Yes, Africa, when it comes to all the continents, is the least developed, but yet the most rich continent. However, it's had its problems. And for the other continents, I think, maybe in my opinion, I think they don't feel like, why should Europe promote Africa? I'm European, so I got to promote what is Europe. And so maybe I'll cut them a slack, or maybe I'll say, this is just their prerogative. They decide what they want to teach, because this is their society. And at the end of the day, I think it makes sense that you teach what is in your society and decide what to do with other societies, whether you want to go in depth or be shallow. And so I think the responsibility is on Black people in the diaspora to start teaching ourselves, since we know the history. And if we don't know it, we got to research, we got to find it. What I have found, though, let me add this real quick. What I have found is that when I was in Africa, most of the researchers that come to Africa to research Africa, most of the documentaries that you watch on Netflix and on big media screen were not made by Africans. Most of these documentaries were made by Europeans. And so why is it that they are coming to our continent to tell our story? And even that is not the most accurate. And so that's what I'm saying, that it is our responsibility to learn about our history. Since our forefathers, some way, somehow failed to do that, we have to now start learning it so we can teach ourselves and teach our children too. This is how we as Africans get to enrich ourselves with Africa, with our history. And once we know this, we are empowered. We have the identity now to connect, because once you know yourself and know your history, it gives you that self-confidence to appreciate you and then appreciate others who look like you as well.
Thank you. Now, do you believe that the relationships between African immigrants and African American can be repaired? And do you think it is critical now to repair those relationships, dealing with COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement?
I believe it can be repaired. They always say it takes a village. One thing that we have lost, I think, as Africans, or we have not paid Black people, Africans, Black people, is the sense of community. And it also stems from what you just talked about. We don't know ourselves that much. We don't understand our history. We don't understand our identity and our foundation. And so we walk around not appreciating us and what we have, but appreciating everybody else. We appreciate things around us. Now, let me say this loosely. Let me not say all of us, but a lot of us, let me say some of us, appreciate everything else around us and others more than we do. And it's because if you don't know who you are, you act like you are not important. Somebody else or something else is more important than you and what you have. So I think that it can be repaired. I think that it's critical because, like I said, it will take us to build us. It will take us to save us. Look, nobody's going to come to your home, Roderica, and say, I think your kitchen or maybe your couch is not looking too cool. So you know what? I want to change your whole kitchen and change your bedroom, unless it's your father, your parents, your family who loves you. But what I'm trying to say is no stranger is going to come to your house and try to change what is in your house. It will take you. If you don't identify the problem and try to fix it or try to get help in fixing it, then that becomes your problem. So as Black people in the diaspora, we have to understand that we have to understand our heritage that gives us the power. And then once we understand that, we can now begin to repair what has been broken, because we lost what we had. We became different people, right? And so now we have to understand that what we had was our peace. We got scattered, and now we become different. African Americans, Caribbeans, we become African in the diaspora, African immigrants, we become all sorts of names and identities. And again, this is where we have to start looking within ourselves and say, where do we come from? Where did we come from? What is our history? What is our background? And once we start doing this, we can start connecting the dots and start repairing, because if we don't build our community, the Asians are not going to build it for us, because the Asians are busy building their community and their continent. The Jewish have a great community. The Europeans, they do, right? Even though they have polished their German American, Irish American.
I'm sorry, but I have to cut you off. Thank you. Okay. That's all we have for today. Thank you for joining this conversation. I'm Roderica Taylor.
Thank you so much for your time.